If this story touches you, please subscribe and comment below. Your support means everything. Let's begin. Officer Michael Reed stepped onto bus 49, nodding politely to the driver. It was just another routine check on his afternoon patrol through Maplewood. The early autumn sun slanted through. Smudged windows casting long shadows across worn seats as the bus rattled and sighed at each stop. "Afternoon, folks," he said with a practiced smile, steadying himself against a handrail as the bus lurched forward. Most passengers barely looked up from their phones or books, just tired faces. Heading home after long days, Michael's gaze swept methodically across the bus. 15 years on the force had taught him to notice details others missed. A memory flickered. His daughter Emma at 7, the same small hands, the same vulnerable innocence before the divorce took him away from daily bedtime stories. He pushed the thought aside. Focus, Reed. That's when he saw her. In the back corner seat sat a small girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, with dark braided hair falling loose at the ends. She wore a faded blue dress that hung from her thin shoulders like a hand-me-down meant for someone else. What caught Michael's attention wasn't her size or her clothes, but the way she curled into herself, one arm wrapped protectively around her stomach, the other clutching a yellow backpack with frayed straps and a broken zipper. Michael hesitated. Something in her posture stirred his instincts, the slight rocking motion, the tension in her shoulders. As he watched, she wiped her eyes quickly with her sleeve, leaving a smudge of dirt across her cheek. The gesture was practiced, almost secretive, a child who had learned to hide her tears. He approached slowly, his boots heavy, against the bus floor. "Hello there," he said gently, crouching down to meet her eye level. "My name is Officer Reed. Are you all right?" The girl looked up, startled. Her eyes were large and dark, rimmed with red from crying, yet they held something beyond simple sadness, a wariness that seemed too old for her face. She pressed her lips together and nodded unconvincingly, her gaze immediately dropping to her worn sneakers, one of which had been mended with what looked like tape. "Are you sure? You seem upset." Michael kept his voice soft, the way he used to when Emma had nightmares. "Is someone meeting you at your stop?" She nodded again, but then winced suddenly, her small hand pressing harder against her stomach. The sound that followed, a hollow, prolonged growl, seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet of the bus. Several passengers glanced over briefly before returning to their private worlds. The bus wheels hummed against the pavement. Outside, shadows lengthened as afternoon crept toward evening. "Does your tummy hurt?" Michael asked, concern deepening the lines around his eyes. For a long moment, the girl said nothing. Her fingers twisted the fabric of her dress, revealing a small hole near the hem. The bus slowed, brakes squealing as it approached another stop. No one got on. No one got off. Finally, she leaned forward slightly. Michael had to strain to hear her whisper, "My belly's moving." The words hung in the air between them. Michael felt a chill climb his spine despite the warmth of the bus. He'd heard many strange things in his years of service, confessions, pleas, warnings, but something about those 3 words from this child's mouth struck him differently. "Moving? What do you mean?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady while his mind raced through dark possibilities. "It makes noises and then it hurts," she explained, her voice quivering like a plucked string. "Sometimes it feels like there's something inside pushing around." Her eyes met his briefly, a flash of vulnerability, of trust being cautiously extended. Michael thought of the calls he'd answered over the years. Children in situations no child should ever face, homes where food was scarce but excuses were plentiful. The familiar knot of dread tightened in his chest. "What's your name?" he asked, his throat suddenly dry. "Lily," she replied, clutching her backpack, tighter against her chest like a shield. "Lily, where's your mom or dad? Are they waiting for you?" The girl's eyes darted to the window, to the passing houses with their warm lights beginning to flicker on against the approaching dusk. "Mom's at home. She's—" Lily paused, seeming to weigh her. words carefully. She's having a bad day. The bus slowed as it approached the next stop. Lily straightened suddenly. This is my stop. Michael made a quick decision. This wasn't protocol, but protocol didn't always serve the quiet suffering hiding in plain sight. Would it be okay if I walked with you just to make sure you get home safely? Lily hesitated, then gave a small nod, her thin shoulders relaxing just slightly. As they stepped off the bus together into the cooling afternoon, Michael felt something beyond professional concern. The girl's words echoed in his mind. My belly's moving. Behind them, the bus pulled away with a hiss and rumble, carrying its passengers onward to homes and lives Michael would never know. What he couldn't yet see was how this moment, this chance encounter on an ordinary Tuesday, would uncover something both simpler and more heartbreaking than he imagined, and how sometimes the most devastating truths hide behind the most innocent words. The neighborhood changed as Officer Michael Reed walked alongside Lily. Neat storefronts gave way to apartment buildings with peeling paint. Window air conditioners dripped onto cracked sidewalks, and chain-link fences guarded tiny patches of yellowed grass. Lily walked with her head down, occasionally stopping to catch her breath. Each time her stomach growled, she'd press her hand against it and wince. Is your home far from here? Michael asked, slowing his pace to match hers. Just around the corner, Lily replied, pointing to a 3-story brick building with a faded "For Rent" sign hanging crookedly in the window. We live on the top floor. As they approached, Michael noticed several details at once. A broken mailbox, missing buzzers by the entrance, and a distinct absence of children playing outside despite the decent weather. His training told him these were signs of a neighborhood where people kept to themselves, often for good reason. The stairwell smelled of cooking oil and dampness. By the second flight, Lily was breathing heavily, her small hand gripping the railing. You okay? Michael asked. Lily nodded, but her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. The elevator doesn't work anymore. Mom says we have to be extra quiet because the landlord doesn't like noise. When they reached the 3rd floor, Lily led him to apartment 3C. The door was weathered, its paint chipped at the edges. She hesitated before knocking softly. Mom, she called. I'm home. Silence followed. Lily knocked again, a little louder. The door opened slowly, revealing a woman whose resemblance to Lily was unmistakable. The same dark eyes, the same delicate features, but whose face carried the weight of years beyond her actual age. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wore a faded housecoat. When she saw Michael, alarm flashed across her face. Ms. Michael began. Carter, she supplied quickly. Rebecca Carter. Her eyes darted between Michael and Lily. Is everything okay? Did something happen? Mom, this is Officer Reed, Lily explained. He was checking the bus and I'm just making sure Lily got home safely. Michael interjected smoothly, not wanting to worry Ms. Carter unnecessarily. She mentioned not feeling well on the bus. Rebecca's expression shifted from concern to something more complex, embarrassment perhaps, or resignation. Thank you for bringing her home. She placed her hand protectively on Lily's shoulder. We've both been fighting a bug lately. Michael nodded, though his instincts told him there was more to the story. As Rebecca guided Lily inside, he caught a glimpse of the apartment beyond. Sparse furniture, bare walls, a small table with 2 mismatched chairs. Ms. Carter, if you don't mind, I'd like to speak with you for a moment, Michael said. Maybe I can help. Rebecca hesitated, then turned to Lily. Sweetheart, why don't you go change out of your school clothes? Once Lily disappeared down the short hallway, Rebecca's composure faltered. Officer, I know what this must look like, but I'm doing my best. Things have been difficult lately. I'm not here to judge, Michael assured her. I'm concerned about Lily. She told me something on the bus that worried me. What did she say? Rebecca asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Before Michael could answer, a loud crash came from another room, followed by Lily's frightened voice calling out, Mom! They rushed toward the sound, Michael's heart pounding. What they found in the small bedroom wasn't what either of them expected, and it would change everything Michael thought he understood about Lily's mysterious words. Michael followed Rebecca down the narrow hallway, his police instincts on high alert. The bedroom door stood ajar, revealing a small space that held little more than a twin mattress on the floor and a dresser with a missing drawer. Lily stood beside an overturned cardboard box, her eyes wide with distress. Around her feet lay scattered treasures, a collection of colorful rocks, several library books, and an old stuffed rabbit missing one ear. The box itself had fallen from atop the dresser, bringing down a small lamp with it. "I'm sorry," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "I was trying to reach Mr. Whiskers." She pointed to the stuffed rabbit. "He helps when my belly hurts." Rebecca knelt beside, her daughter gathering the fallen items. "It's okay, sweetheart. Nothing's broken." But Michael noticed how her hands shook slightly as she replaced the lamp, how her eyes anxiously assessed the damage as if calculating a cost she couldn't afford. "Let me help," Michael offered, crouching down to collect the books. He noticed their titles, all about animals and nature, and how carefully Lily had maintained them despite their Property of Maplewood Public Library stamps. "You like reading about animals?" he asked Lily, trying to ease the tension. She nodded, her earlier distress momentarily. "Forgotten. I want to be a veterinarian someday." Her stomach growled loudly, causing her to wrap her arms around herself again. The sound echoed in the bare room. Michael glanced at Rebecca, who was now standing with her back against the wall, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. Her eyes met his, and in that moment, understanding passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of something neither wanted to name. "When did you last eat, Lily?" Michael asked gently. The question hung in the air. Lily looked to her mother, uncertain. "Breakfast?" Rebecca answered, her voice strained. "She had breakfast. Yesterday's breakfast," Lily corrected quietly, her eyes downcast. "Mom didn't feel good enough to go to the store." Rebecca's face crumpled with shame. "The paychecks are delayed again, and the medicine costs so much." She stopped herself, seemingly remembering Michael's presence. "We're managing. It's just temporary." Michael thought of the precinct's break room, where officers complained about the quality of free donuts. He thought of his own refrigerator, reliably stocked. The contrast made his chest ache. "My belly keeps moving and making noises," Lily explained, looking up at Michael with innocent eyes. "Sometimes it hurts so much I can't sleep." The realization hit Michael like a physical blow. What he had feared might be something sinister was actually something heartbreakingly simple. Hunger. Not the kind that comes from skipping lunch, but the deep, persistent hunger that gnaws from the inside. "I have an idea," Michael said, his decision already made. "How about I bring us all some dinner? There's a diner just down the block." Rebecca started to protest, but Michael raised his hand. "Please, I insist." 20 minutes later, they sat around the small kitchen table with takeout containers of hot food. Michael watched as Lily carefully ate her chicken soup, savoring each spoonful as if it might be her last. Rebecca picked at her sandwich, her pride clearly battling with necessity. "Officer Reed," Lily said between careful bites, "do other kids' bellies move too?" The question nearly broke Michael's composure. "Sometimes," he answered honestly, "but they shouldn't have to." After dinner, while Lily returned to her room to organize her treasures, Rebecca spoke in hushed tones. "It wasn't always like this," she explained, her fingers nervously tracing the edge of the table. "I used to have a good job at the hospital. Then I got sick and the bills piled up and—" She paused, swallowing hard. "I keep telling myself it's temporary, but Lily deserves better than temporary solutions." Michael nodded, a plan already forming in his mind. "Ms. Carter, I might know some people who can help, not just with food, but with everything else." What Michael didn't say, what he couldn't yet promise, was how deeply Lily's situation had affected him, or how determined he was to make a difference. As he prepared to leave, Lily approached with, Mr. Whiskers clutched to her chest. "Will you come back?" she asked, hope flickering in her eyes like a fragile flame. "Yes," Michael replied, surprised by the certainty in his own voice. "I'll be back tomorrow." As he walked down the creaking stairs, Michael made a phone call that would set in motion events none of them could have anticipated. Events that would test the limits of compassion in a system not designed for happy endings. The next morning, Michael sat at his desk in the precinct, the origami fox from Lily propped against his computer monitor. He'd barely slept. His mind replaying images of the sparse apartment, Lily's careful eating, Rebecca's quiet dignity in the face of desperate circumstances. "What's with the paper fox?" asked Sergeant Diaz, placing a coffee mug on Michael's desk. "New hobby?" "A gift," Michael replied, then hesitated before adding, "From a little girl I met yesterday. Her situation is complicated." Diaz raised an eyebrow. "The Carter case? Heard you called social services." Michael nodded. The call he'd made last night hadn't been easy. After 15 years on the force, he knew the system's limitations, its tendency to separate families rather than support them. But he also knew that Lily needed more help than he alone could provide. "Susan from Family Services is stopping by," Diaz said. "She's good people. If anyone can navigate this without making it worse, it's her." An hour later, Susan Winters sat across from Michael, reviewing his report. Her salt and pepper hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and decades of working within a flawed system had left their mark in the lines around her eyes. "Single mother, medical issues, food insecurity," she summarized. "Unfortunately, not unique. What makes this case special to you, Officer Reed?" Michael considered the question. "The girl, Lily, she's resilient, creative, making origami from discarded magazines, maintaining library books like treasures, and her mother's trying, really trying. They don't need to be separated, they need support." Susan's expression softened. "I appreciate your concern, but I have to follow protocol. An assessment visit, paperwork, then we'll see what resources we can connect them with." "When?" Michael pressed. "I can go this afternoon. You're welcome to join, given your rapport with the family." The autumn sun was beginning its descent when they arrived at the Carter apartment. Michael knocked, remembering Lily's words about being quiet for the landlord's sake. Rebecca opened the door, surprise flickering across her face at seeing Michael alongside a stranger. "Ms. Carter," Michael began. "This is Susan Winters from Family Services. I called her about your situation." Rebecca's expression froze, her hand tightening on the doorframe. "Family Services?" Her voice held a note of barely controlled panic. "May we come in?" Susan asked gently. "I'd just like to talk." Inside, the apartment looked different. Small efforts at improvement were evident. A vase of wildflowers on the kitchen table, the broken shelf from yesterday now steadied with books as makeshift supports. Lily emerged from her room, her face brightening at the sight of Michael. "You came back." Then, noticing Susan, she grew hesitant. "Who's that?" "This is Ms. Winters," Michael explained. "She helps families who need some extra support." While Susan spoke with Rebecca in the kitchen, Michael sat with Lily in her room, where she proudly showed him her latest origami creation, a delicate butterfly made from a colorful magazine page. "My teacher says I'm good at art," Lily confided, "but sometimes I get too tired to finish my projects at school." "Does your belly still move?" Michael asked. Lily nodded. "Not as loud today. Mom found some crackers this morning." The casual way she mentioned hunger twisted something in Michael's chest. No child should accept such hardship as normal. From the kitchen, Rebecca's voice rose slightly. "Temporary situation. Looking for work every day." When Michael and Susan left an hour later, the weight of bureaucracy hung between them. "Well?" Michael prompted as they reached the street. Susan sighed. "They qualify for emergency food assistance and possibly housing support. But the wait lists are long, and there's a mountain of paperwork." She glanced at him. You realize if things don't improve quickly, temporary placement for Lily might be considered? Placement? The word landed like a stone. You mean foster care? It's a last resort, but her needs aren't being met. Susan's voice was professionally detached, but her eyes showed genuine concern. I'll expedite what I can. That night, Michael sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by printouts of community resources, food bank locations, and job listings. The system moved slowly, but Lily's hunger wouldn't wait. His phone buzzed with a text from Susan. Emergency food vouchers approved, can deliver tomorrow. A small victory, but not enough. The paper fox watched him from the table as Michael made another call. This one not to any official agency, but to someone who might be able to help in ways the system couldn't. What Michael didn't realize was that his growing involvement with the Carters would soon test not just his compassion, but his understanding of justice itself, and force him to choose between following rules and doing what's right. The community center bustled with activity as Michael entered through the side door. Children played basketball in the small gym while volunteers prepared for the afternoon meal program. He spotted Elena Rodriguez directing operations from behind a folding table covered with clipboards and schedules. Elena had been running the Maplewood Community Outreach Program for 15 years, longer than Michael had been on the force. What she lacked in official authority, she made up for in community connections and practical solutions. Officer Reed, she greeted him, her sharp eyes taking in his civilian clothes and the tension in his shoulders. This isn't your usual beat. I need your help, Elena, Michael said, cutting to the chase. It's about a family. 10 minutes later, they sat in Elena's cramped office as Michael explained Lily and Rebecca's situation. He showed her the paper fox, now slightly worn from being carried in his pocket. The system's moving too slowly, he concluded. Food vouchers are a start, but they need more than that. Rebecca needs a job, they need stable housing, and Lily, he paused, remembering the little girl's careful rationing of each spoonful of soup. Lily needs to be a child, not worried about her moving belly. Elena leaned back in her chair. You know I can't work miracles, right? The recession hit us hard, too. I'm not asking for miracles, just possibilities. Elena studied him, her expression thoughtful. This seems personal for you, Michael. He didn't answer immediately. Was it personal? The image of Lily's worn shoes and careful smile flashed in his mind. Maybe it is. Elena nodded. Decision made. Okay, bring them to the center. Tomorrow afternoon, we're having a community dinner. I'll introduce Rebecca to some people who might be hiring. As for immediate needs, she scribbled something on a notepad. This address. My cousin runs a food pantry out of his church. Tell him I sent you. The next day, Michael knocked on the Carter's door, arms loaded with groceries from Elena's cousin's pantry. Rebecca's surprise was evident when she opened the door. Officer Reed. Michael, he corrected, stepping inside. I'm off duty. Lily appeared from her room, her face lighting up at the sight of the grocery bags. Is that food? As Rebecca put away the groceries, Michael explained about the community center dinner that evening. I appreciate the thought, Rebecca said, her voice tight with pride. But we don't need charity. It's not charity, Michael countered gently. It's community, and Elena might know about job opportunities. Rebecca paused, a box of pasta in her hand. Jobs? Hope, dangerous and fragile, flickered across her face. That evening, the community center hummed with conversation and laughter. Families from all walks of life shared tables and stories over simple but hearty food. Lily, initially shy, soon joined a group of children making crafts at a side table. Michael watched as Elena introduced Rebecca to various people. The manager of a local bakery, a hospital administrator, the owner of a cleaning service. For the first time since he'd met her, Rebecca's shoulders relaxed slightly, her smile becoming less guarded. Your friend is good at this, Susan Winters said, appearing at Michael's side. He hadn't expected to see the social worker here. Elena knows everyone, Michael agreed. I'm surprised to see you outside office hours, Susan shrugged. I follow up on my cases. Some of them anyway. She nodded toward Lily, who was showing another girl how to fold a paper crane. She seems different tonight, more like a child should be. Amazing what a full stomach and a little hope can do, Michael replied. As the evening wound down, Rebecca approached them, her eyes brighter than Michael had ever seen them. The hospital has an administrative position opening next week, she said, her voice trembling with contained excitement. Part-time, but with flexible hours and benefits after 3 months. Elena's friend is on the hiring committee. The drive back to the Carters' apartment was filled with Lily's animated chatter about her new friends and Rebecca's cautious planning for the interview. The change in both of them was palpable, a lightness that hadn't been there before. At their door, Rebecca turned to Michael. Why are you doing all this? You barely know us. Before he could answer, his phone rang. The precinct number flashed on the screen. Reed, he answered, stepping away slightly. The brief conversation changed everything. When he turned back to Rebecca, his expression was grave. What is it? She asked, instantly alert to the shift. There's been a complaint, Michael said carefully, aware of Lily listening nearby. Someone reported concerns about Lily's welfare to Child Protective Services. They're sending an investigator tomorrow morning. The hope that had been building all evening crumbled in Rebecca's eyes, replaced by something like terror. Who would, she began, then stopped, realization dawning. The landlord. He saw you and that social worker yesterday. He's been trying to get us out for months. Michael's mind raced through options, protocols, consequences. What happened next would depend on decisions that went against everything in his training, but perhaps aligned with something deeper, something more fundamental than rules in a manual. Sometimes doing the right thing meant stepping outside the lines, and Michael was about to cross one. Morning arrived with leaden skies threatening rain, fitting weather for the storm brewing in Michael's mind. He'd barely slept, weighing options and consequences until dawn streaked the horizon. By 7:30 a.m., he was parked outside the Carters' apartment building, watching as the neighborhood reluctantly awakened. A text from Susan had confirmed his fears. The CPS investigator assigned to Lily's case was Howard Benson, a by-the-book bureaucrat known for rigid adherence to protocols over practical solutions. Michael's phone buzzed with a call from Sergeant Diaz. Reed, where are you? Briefing started 10 minutes ago. I'm taking a personal day, Michael replied, his decision crystallizing even as he spoke. Family emergency. Since when do you have family emergencies? Diaz asked, suspicion evident in his voice. Since now, Michael answered simply, and ended the call. Upstairs, Rebecca opened the door looking as though she hadn't slept either. Behind her, Lily sat at the kitchen table, carefully arranging her school supplies in her worn backpack. You're here early, Rebecca said, surprise momentarily displacing her worry. I've been thinking about the CPS visit, Michael said, keeping his voice low. Benson, the investigator coming today, has a reputation. He's thorough, but inflexible. Rebecca's hands twisted nervously. What does that mean for us? It means he'll see an apartment with minimal food, a mother struggling financially, and a child who's been hungry. He won't see the progress we're making or the community support that's building. Michael took a deep breath. Unless we show him. How? I have an idea, but it's not exactly by the book. You'd need to trust me. Rebecca studied him, weighing his words against a lifetime of broken promises and systems that had failed her. Why are you risking your job for us? Michael glanced at Lily, who was now carefully folding a scrap of paper into another origami creation, her face a study in concentration despite the uncertainty swirling around her. Because some things matter more than rules, he answered simply. 3 hours later, the Carter apartment was transformed. Michael had called in every favor he could think of. Elena had arrived with additional groceries and helped organize the kitchen. Susan, taking a long coffee break from her official duties, had brought forms showing Rebecca's application for various assistance programs was being expedited. Most surprisingly, Sergeant Diaz had appeared at the door with an old desk from his garage. "For the kid," he'd grumbled, avoiding Michael's startled expression. "My daughter outgrew it." When Howard Benson arrived at precisely 11 p.m., clipboard in hand and frown firmly in place, he found not a scene of neglect, but a modest apartment humming with positive activity. Rebecca was discussing her upcoming job interview with Elena. Lily was showing Susan her school artwork at her new desk, and Michael, deliberately in civilian clothes, was assembling a donated bookshelf. "What is this?" Benson demanded, looking bewildered. "Community support," Michael replied calmly. "The very thing your report is supposed to be evaluating." Benson's investigation proceeded with meticulous attention to detail. He inspected the kitchen cabinets, now stocked, questioned Rebecca about her parenting approach prepared with Susan's coaching, and even spoke privately with Lily about her home life. When Lily proudly showed him her origami collection and explained how her moving belly didn't hurt as much anymore, something in Benson's rigid demeanor softened almost imperceptibly. Outside afterward, Benson pulled Michael aside. "This is highly irregular, Officer Reed. Your involvement goes well beyond professional boundaries." "Sometimes boundaries need to be reconsidered," Michael replied. "Perhaps," Benson conceded, making a final note on his clipboard. "My report will reflect what I observed today. A family facing challenges but with significant community support. For now, no removal recommendation." Relief washed over Michael. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Benson warned. "This situation remains under review. If the job doesn't materialize, if the support system falters." He left the implication hanging. After everyone had left, Rebecca sank onto the couch, emotional exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "We passed this test," she whispered. "But for how long? One bad day, one missed meal, and we're back where we started." Before Michael could respond, his phone rang again. This time, the caller ID displayed a number he didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was clipped and authoritative. "Officer Reed, this is Captain Mercer from Internal Affairs. We need to discuss your involvement with the Carter case, immediately." Michael's stomach dropped. The line between helping and overstepping had just become razor thin, and he had clearly crossed it. What came next could cost him everything. But looking at Lily, happily arranging books on her new shelf, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. Some battles were worth fighting, even if you stood alone. The Internal Affairs office felt deliberately unwelcoming. Stark white walls, uncomfortable chairs, and a clock that ticked too loudly. Michael sat across from Captain Mercer, a stern woman whose reputation for by-the-book procedures made Howard Benson look flexible. "Officer Reed," she began, sliding a folder across the desk. "Your service record is exemplary. 15 years, 6 commendations, not a single complaint." She paused, her expression unreadable. "Until now." "With respect, Captain, I stand by my actions," Michael replied, keeping his voice steady despite the anxiety churning inside him. "Your actions?" Mercer's eyebrow arched. "You mean using department resources to benefit a civilian case? Taking a personal day under false pretenses? Interfering with a CPS investigation?" Put like that, it sounded worse than Michael had allowed himself to admit. "The system was failing them," he said simply. "The system has protocols for a reason," Mercer countered. "When officers decide which rules to follow, we undermine public trust." She leaned forward. "Suspension is the minimum consequence here. Dismissal is on the table." The word landed like a physical blow. Dismissal. 15 years of service erased. "I need your badge and service weapon," Mercer continued. "Pending the full investigation, you are suspended without pay. The hearing is scheduled for next Friday." Walking out of the precinct without his badge felt like losing a limb. The weight he'd carried for 15 years, both burden and purpose, suddenly absent. Rebecca's apartment door opened before Michael could knock. "We've been watching from the window," she explained, her face tight with concern. "Lily was worried when you didn't come yesterday." Inside, Lily sat at her new desk, papers spread before her. When she saw Michael, she jumped up and ran to him. "I made something for you," she exclaimed, pressing a paper creation into his hand, an intricately folded police badge. The irony wasn't lost on Michael. "It's beautiful," he said, careful to keep his voice normal. "You're getting even better. Are you okay?" Rebecca asked quietly while Lily returned to her desk. "You look different." "I've been suspended," Michael admitted. No point hiding it. "The department doesn't appreciate officers who color outside the lines." Rebecca's face fell. "Because of us." "Michael, I'm so sorry." "It was my choice," he interrupted firmly. "How did the interview go?" A small smile broke through her worry. "They offered me the position. Part-time administrative work, starting Monday. The pay isn't much, but it's steady, and there are benefits after 90 days. For the first time in days, Michael felt something lighten in his chest. "That's wonderful news. They even have after-school programs for employees' children," Rebecca continued, glancing at Lily. "She won't be alone while I'm working." As evening approached, Michael helped Lily with her homework while Rebecca prepared a simple dinner from the donated groceries. The domestic normalcy of it struck him as both strange and comforting, so different from his empty apartment with its takeout containers and silent rooms. Over dinner, Lily chattered about her day at school, her moving belly now a fading memory rather than a constant companion. Rebecca shared details about her new job, her voice growing more confident with each plan she described. Michael listened, pushing aside thoughts of his uncertain future. Whatever happened at the hearing, this moment, this small victory of a family beginning to stand on solid ground, felt worth the cost. As he prepared to leave, Rebecca walked him to the door. "The hearing," she said quietly. "Is there anything we can do?" Michael shook his head. "It's departmental. Civilian testimony wouldn't help." Rebecca's expression hardened with determination. "There must be something. You risked everything for us." Before Michael could respond, his phone rang, Sergeant Diaz calling. "Reed," Michael answered, stepping into the hallway. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest," Diaz said without preamble. "But you're not without allies. There's a community meeting tomorrow night. People are talking about what happened with the Carters, about how the system works, or doesn't." "What kind of meeting?" Michael asked, puzzled. "The kind that makes department brass nervous," Diaz replied. "Elena Rodriguez is organizing it. You might want to be there." After ending the call, Michael stood in the dim hallway, considering the implications. A public meeting about his case could either save his career or end it permanently. What he couldn't know, was that across town, someone else was making plans that would change everything again. Someone who saw Lily and Rebecca not as people to help, but as pawns in a different game entirely. The real battle was just beginning. The community center buzzed with voices as Michael slipped in through the side entrance. Far more people had gathered than he expected, not just residents from Rebecca and Lily's neighborhood, but people from across the city. He recognized faces from the precinct, social workers, teachers, even Howard Benson from CPS, sitting stiffly in the back row. Elena Rodriguez stood at the front, organizing speakers with her characteristic efficiency. When she spotted Michael, she motioned him toward an empty seat near the front. "What is all this?" he whispered as he sat down. "The beginning of something," Elena replied cryptically before returning to the podium. As the meeting began, Michael realized this wasn't just about his case. Speaker after speaker shared stories of families falling through cracks in the system, children going hungry despite parents' best efforts, working families one illness away from homelessness, bureaucratic barriers preventing timely help. Susan Winters approached the microphone, her professional demeanor momentarily set aside. "I've been a social worker for 22 years, she began. "I entered this field to help families stay together, not tear them apart. But increasingly, our systems do the opposite. From the back of the room, a man stood up. This is all very touching, but there are rules. For a reason. Officer Reed violated department protocols. Michael recognized him immediately. Frank Daniels, the landlord of Rebecca's building. So this was the person who had reported them to CPS. Mr. Daniels, Elena acknowledged, her tone carefully neutral. You have concerns. I have a business to run, he replied. When tenants can't pay, when their children aren't properly cared for, it affects property values. Officer Reed overstepped his authority. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Michael felt a surge of anger, but before he could respond, another voice cut through the tension. My daughter wasn't neglected. She was hungry. Rebecca stood in the doorway, Lily beside her, both looking nervous but determined. Michael hadn't expected them to come. We were struggling, Rebecca continued, her voice growing steadier as she spoke. But instead of help, all we got were threats. Mr. Daniels here didn't report us because he was concerned about Lily. He reported us because I was late with rent, and he wanted us gone. Daniels' face flushed. That's not... It's exactly true, interrupted an elderly woman who stood up slowly. He did the same to my grandson's family last year. Reported them when they complained about the broken heating. More voices joined in, sharing similar experiences. Michael watched as Daniels' confident demeanor crumbled under the weight of public scrutiny. Captain Mercer, who had been observing silently, approached the podium. The room fell quiet. Officer Reed's hearing is an internal matter, she stated firmly. However, I am troubled by what I'm hearing tonight. Our department's mission is to serve and protect all citizens, not just those who can afford it. She turned to look directly at Michael. Sometimes following the spirit of the law means questioning its letter. The department will be reviewing our protocols regarding officers' community involvement. It wasn't a reversal of his suspension, but it was something. An acknowledgement that perhaps the system itself needed examination. As the meeting continued, Lily slipped into the chair beside Michael, her small hand finding his. Are you still in trouble? She whispered. Less than before, he answered honestly. Good. Because Mom says you're our hero, even if you don't wear your badge anymore. The simplicity of her statement caught Michael off guard. Hero, not a word he'd ever applied to himself. After the meeting dispersed, Elena pulled Michael, Rebecca, and Lily into her office. That went better than expected, she said. But we're not done. Daniels isn't just a landlord, he's a developer. He's been buying properties throughout the neighborhood, letting them deteriorate, then using code violations as leverage to force people out. Why? Rebecca asked. Because the city's planning a revitalization project, Michael realized. Pieces falling into place. Property values will skyrocket once it's announced. Elena nodded grimly. And families like yours are inconvenient obstacles. What can we do? Rebecca asked, unconsciously pulling Lily closer. Fight back, Elena replied. But it won't be easy. Daniels has connections at City Hall. Michael's phone buzzed with a text from Sergeant Diaz. Need to talk. ASAP. Found something about Daniels you need to see. Looking up from his phone, Michael met Rebecca's worried gaze. Whatever came next would require more than individual acts of kindness. It would require challenging a system designed to benefit people like Frank Daniels at the expense of families like the Carters. And somewhere in this fight, Michael would have to decide what kind of officer, what kind of person he truly wanted to be. Rain pattered against the windows of the small coffee shop where Michael waited for Sergeant Diaz. The place was nearly empty, just a barista wiping down counters and an elderly man solving a crossword puzzle in the corner. The bell above the door jingled as Diaz entered, shaking water from his jacket. Unlike his usual confident stride, he moved cautiously, eyes scanning the room before sliding into the booth across from Michael. You weren't followed? Diaz asked quietly. Followed. What are we, in a spy movie? Michael attempted a joke, but Diaz's expression remained serious. This isn't just about overstepping boundaries anymore, Diaz said, sliding a manila folder across the table. It's about corruption. Michael opened the folder to find property records, bank statements, and city planning documents. Where did you get these? Let's just say I have friends in the records department, Diaz replied. Look at the highlighted sections. As Michael reviewed the documents, a pattern emerged. Frank Daniels had purchased 12 properties in Rebecca's neighborhood over the past 18 months, all at significantly below market value. More troubling were the transfers from Daniels' account to someone named Jay Morton. Who's Morton? Michael asked. James Morton, Deputy Commissioner of Urban Development, Diaz replied. The same man who will announce which neighborhoods receive revitalization funding next month. Michael's stomach tightened. They're working together. Looks that way. Daniels gets insider information about development plans, buys properties cheap, forces out tenants, then sells at a premium once improvements begin. Diaz leaned forward. And Morton gets mysterious payments for his consulting services. This is why Daniels was so determined to get Rebecca and Lily out, Michael realized. Their building is probably next on the list. There's more, Diaz continued. Those code violations Daniels reports, many of them are caused by his own neglect of the properties. He refuses repairs, then reports tenants when conditions deteriorate. The injustice of it burned in Michael's chest. We need to take this to Captain Mercer. That's the problem, Diaz replied, his voice dropping further. Morton and Mercer are old friends from the E Academy. I'm not sure where her loyalties lie. Michael sat back, processing the implications. So what's our next move? Carefully, Diaz emphasized. We need more evidence before we go public. And you need to warn Rebecca. Daniels isn't done with them. That evening, Michael found Rebecca at the hospital where she'd just finished her third day of work. She was arranging files at a reception desk, a name badge pinned proudly to her blouse. Her face brightened when she saw him, then quickly shifted to concern. What's wrong? Where's Lily? Michael asked, glancing around. In the children's program down the hall. They have activities for employees' kids. Pride and relief mingled in her voice. She loves it. Actual art supplies, other children to play with. That's great, Michael said sincerely before lowering his voice. But we need to talk about Daniels. As Michael explained, what he and Diaz had discovered, Rebecca's expression hardened. I knew something wasn't right, she said. Last month he offered several families cash to move out immediately. Not much, but enough to tempt people who were struggling. Those who refused suddenly had violations reported. Has he approached you? Rebecca nodded. Yesterday, said he'd forget the back rent if we'd be out by the end of the month. When I said we weren't leaving, he mentioned how unfortunate it would be if my new employer learned about my unstable housing situation. Michael felt a cold anger settle in his chest. He threatened your job? Basically, I didn't tell you because, she hesitated, you've already risked so much for us. Before Michael could respond, Lily came bounding down the hallway, a colorful drawing in her hand. Michael, look what I made, she exclaimed, holding up a picture of three figures, clearly meant to be herself, Rebecca, and Michael, standing before what appeared to be a house. It's beautiful, Michael said, momentarily setting aside his concerns. Is that a house? Lily nodded enthusiastically. Ms. Elena showed me pictures of where we might live someday. A real house with our own yard. Rebecca's eyes widened in surprise. Elena showed you houses? After school today, she said it's part of something called community housing. Lily pointed to her drawing. And I put you in it too, Michael, because you're family now. The innocent declaration caught Michael off guard. Family. The word resonated in ways he hadn't expected, stirring emotions he'd kept carefully contained. Later, walking to his car, Michael's phone rang with an unknown number. Reed, he answered cautiously. Officer Reed, came a smooth voice he didn't recognize. My name is James Morton. I believe we should meet to discuss your situation and the Carters. Michael froze in the parking lot, rain soaking through his jacket. "How did you get this number?" "I have many resources," Morton replied calmly, "just as I have many ways to help or hinder a suspended officer's career or a single mother's fresh start." The threat was unmistakable. "What do you want?" Michael asked, his grip tightening on the phone. "Simply to ensure we all understand each other. Tomorrow, noon, the Riverside Park gazebo." The line went dead, leaving Michael standing in the rain, Lily's drawing of their family carefully protected inside his jacket, a fragile hope now threatened by forces more powerful than he'd anticipated. But threats worked both ways, and Michael now had evidence that could bring down not just a corrupt landlord, but potentially officials within the city, government itself. The question was, could he gather enough proof before Morton and Daniels made good on their threats? Riverside Park stood empty under the gray noon sky, most visitors deterred by the persistent drizzle. Michael arrived early, positioning himself with a clear view of all approaching paths. He'd spent a sleepless night weighing options, consulting with Diaz and making preparations. The manila folder tucked inside his jacket contained copies, not originals, of the evidence against Morton and Daniels. Another set sat safely in Elena's office. A third had been entrusted to Susan Winters, with instructions to deliver it to a journalist friend if Michael didn't check in by evening. The gazebo, white and ornate against the dull landscape, remained empty until precisely noon. Then James Morton appeared, walking unhurriedly despite the rain, expensive umbrella held aloft. He was younger than Michael had expected, mid-40s perhaps, with a politician's practiced smile and tailored suit. "Officer Reed," Morton greeted him, stepping into the gazebo's shelter. "Thank you for being punctual." "I'm not here for pleasantries," Michael replied, remaining standing as though. Morton settled onto a bench. "What do you want?" Morton's smile didn't waver. "Directness. I appreciate that quality." He straightened his already impeccable cuffs. "I'll be equally direct. Your interference in Frank Daniels' business affairs has become problematic." "You mean his illegal eviction practices, or his bribes to city officials?" Michael countered. If Morton was surprised by Michael's knowledge, he didn't show it. "Strong accusations, particularly from an officer on suspension for professional misconduct." "I have evidence," Michael said simply. "Documents can be misinterpreted. Records can be explained." Morton's tone remained conversational, as if discussing the weather. "Your career, however, that's harder to salvage once truly damaged, and the Carter family, their situation remains precarious, doesn't it?" The threat lingered in the damp air between them. "Here's what I propose," Morton continued. "You turn over any documents in your possession. You cease involvement with the Carters. In exchange, your suspension is lifted, with a promotion to detective waiting. As for Ms. Carter, her position at the hospital becomes permanent, with a salary increase." "And the other families in the neighborhood?" Michael asked. "The ones Daniels is forcing out?" Morton waved a dismissive hand. "Progress requires change. The revitalization project will benefit the entire city. By displacing those who can't afford to stay. By improving conditions for everyone," Morton corrected smoothly. "Some relocations are inevitable." Michael studied the man before him, confident, untroubled by the human cost of his progress. For a moment he allowed himself to consider the offer, his career restored, Rebecca and Lily secure. But at what price? "I need time to consider," Michael said finally. "Of course," Morton agreed, standing. 24 hours. After that, I'm afraid events will take their natural course." As Morton walked away, umbrella perfectly balanced, Michael remained in the gazebo, rain drumming on its roof like impatient fingers. Rebecca's apartment. Building seemed especially dilapidated that evening, its peeling paint and creaking stairs stark reminders of what was at stake. Michael found Rebecca and Lily in the community room, where Lily was teaching other children to fold paper cranes. "Can we talk?" he asked Rebecca quietly. "In the hallway, Michael explained Morton's offer. watching Rebecca's expression shift from hope to understanding to resolve. "He wants to buy us off," she said, her voice low but steady. "Make us the exceptions while everyone else suffers. It would secure your job, your future," Michael pointed out, playing devil's advocate even as his own mind rebelled against the compromise. Rebecca looked through the doorway at Lily, now surrounded by a small flock of paper birds and smiling children. What lesson would that teach her? That it's okay to abandon others if you get yours? Her words echoed Michael's own internal struggle. "There's another way," he said, decision crystallizing. "But it's risky." "Riskier than trusting corrupt officials?" Rebecca asked with a wry smile that didn't reach her eyes. Michael explained the plan he and Diaz had developed, gathering testimonies from affected residents, documenting building code violations that Daniels had caused through neglect, compiling evidence of the pattern of harassment and threats. "Elena's contacted a housing rights attorney," Michael added, "and Susan's bringing in state-level investigators who aren't connected to Morton." "What can I do?" Rebecca asked without hesitation. "It's your community. They'll listen to you." As they spoke, neither noticed Lily slipping away from the community room, following the sound of angry voices to the building's front entrance. Frank Daniels stood in the lobby, berating an elderly tenant about a late payment. Lily watched from the shadows of the stairwell, her small hands clutching a paper crane she'd made especially for Michael. When Daniels stormed out, slamming the door behind him, Lily emerged to comfort the shaken woman. "Don't worry, Mrs. Chen. Michael is going to help us. He's our hero." Outside, Daniels paused at the sound of the child's voice, his scowl deepening. Pulling out his phone, he made a call. "Morton, we have a problem. That officer is still involved, and now he's organizing the tenants." He listened for a moment. "No, threats aren't working. We need to accelerate. The timeline. Tomorrow." Inside, Lily couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw Daniel's expression through the glass door, cold, calculating, triumphant. Something about it sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the building's inadequate heating. When Michael found her minutes later, she was unusually quiet. The paper crane crumpled slightly in her tight grip. "What's wrong, Lily?" he asked, kneeling to her level. "The bad man was here," she whispered. "He looked happy. Happy like when someone has a secret." Michael's instincts, honed by 15 years of police work, immediately sharpened. Daniel's happy meant trouble, and if they were accelerating their plans, 24 hours might be 24 too many. The game had changed, but so had the players. Dawn had barely broken when the commotion began. Michael, who had spent the night on Elena's office couch, was awakened by his phone buzzing insistently. "Reed," he answered, instantly alert. "They're here." Rebecca's voice was tense but controlled. "City inspectors. 4 of them going door to door with eviction notices. They're claiming emergency health code violations that require immediate evacuation." Michael sat up, scrubbing a hand over his face. "That's not possible. Even legitimate violations require notice periods." "Tell that to the families packing their belongings," Rebecca replied. "They're giving people 2 hours to leave." "I'm on my way," Michael said, already reaching for his shoes. "Call Elena and Susan. Tell everyone not to sign anything." Outside Elena's office, the community center was already filling with confused residents clutching hastily gathered possessions and official-looking papers. "They said our building is unsafe," Mrs. Chen explained, her weathered hands trembling as she showed Michael her notice. "Carbon monoxide concerns. But our detectors work fine. Mr. Jimenez checks them every month." Michael examined the document, noting the authorizing signature. J. Morton, Deputy Commissioner. "This is their move," Diaz said, appearing beside Michael. He'd come straight from his night shift, still in uniform. "Clear everyone out. Demolish the evidence of neglect. Fast-track the development plans." "They can't just throw people onto the street," Michael protested. "Technically, they're offering temporary housing," Diaz pointed out grimly. "A shelter across town for up to 30 days while repairs are made." "Repairs that will never happen," Michael finished the thought. Once everyone's gone, Daniels will claim the buildings aren't worth salvaging. Elena arrived, immediately taking charge of organizing the community center to receive displaced families. Susan followed shortly after with the housing rights attorney she'd contacted, Amara Washington, a formidable woman with a briefcase and a determined expression. "This is illegal on multiple levels," Washington stated after reviewing the notices. "But fighting it will take time these families don't have if they're forced out today. Then we need to buy that time," Michael said, "and I think I know how." An hour later, local news vans lined the street in front of Rebecca's apartment building. Residents stood in a unified group, joined by neighbors from surrounding communities, volunteers from the community center and, most surprisingly, uniformed officers from Michael's precinct, Diaz among them. "What's this about, Sergeant?" asked the lead inspector, clearly unsettled by the media presence. "Just making sure proper procedures are followed," Diaz replied innocently. "Safety first, right?" As cameras rolled, Amara Washington calmly explained to reporters how the emergency violations had only appeared after residents refused buyout offers, how the city had ignored actual repair requests for years, and how the timing coincided suspiciously with the upcoming revitalization. Announcement. "We have documented evidence," she stated clearly for the microphones, "of systematic harassment, deliberately created safety hazards, and potential corruption at the highest levels of city development planning." Rebecca stood nearby, Lily holding tightly to her hand. When a reporter asked about their situation, Rebecca spoke with a quiet dignity that commanded attention. "My daughter and I were struggling," she acknowledged. "But our community supported us. Now it's our turn to support our community." The cameras turned to Lily, who solemnly unfolded a paper crane. "My mom says, 'Home isn't just a building,'" she said, her clear voice carrying surprisingly far. "It's the people who help you when your belly moves." The simple statement, incomprehensible to the reporters but deeply meaningful to those who knew their story, brought unexpected tears to Michael's eyes. Midway through the impromptu press conference, a sleek car pulled up. James Morton emerged, his practiced smile faltering as he assessed the scene. Behind him, Frank Daniels sat in the passenger seat, his face contorted with fury. Morton approached, careful to stay away from the cameras. "What do you think you're doing?" he hissed at Michael. "Shining light on shadows," Michael replied calmly. "Isn't that what public servants are supposed to do?" Morton's eyes narrowed. "You've made a serious mistake, Reed. This won't end well for you." "Maybe not," Michael acknowledged, "but it will end justly." As Morton retreated to his car, Michael felt a small hand slip into his. Lily looked up at him, her expression solemn. "Are the bad men going to win?" she asked quietly. Before Michael could answer, the ground shook with a thunderous crash from inside Rebecca's building. Screams erupted as people backed away from the entrance, where dust billowed out in a choking cloud. "Mom!" Lily cried as Rebecca rushed toward the building where several elderly residents had remained, refusing to leave their homes. Michael grabbed her arm. "Wait!" But Rebecca pulled free, determination overriding fear. "Mrs. Chen is still inside." Without hesitation, Michael ran after her, plunging into the dust-filled darkness as Diaz shouted into his radio for emergency services. Behind them, through the settling dust, Michael caught a glimpse of Morton and Daniels driving away. Morton's face impassive, Daniels twisted in a satisfied smirk. The collapse hadn't been an accident, and anyone who might be trapped inside was merely collateral damage in their scheme, acceptable losses in the name of progress. Dust hung thick in the air, turning day to twilight inside the building's hallway. Michael pulled his shirt over his nose, straining to see through the haze. Ahead, he could just make out Rebecca's silhouette as she called out for Mrs. Chen. "The stairwell collapsed," she coughed, pointing to where the main stairs had partially given way. "The upper floors are cut off." Michael assessed the damage with growing alarm. The building's long-neglected structure had finally surrendered, but the pattern of the collapse seemed oddly specific, as if the failure points had been selected. "Mrs. Chen," Rebecca called again, moving cautiously toward apartment 1C. A faint reply came from inside. Michael tried the door, finding it jammed. With Rebecca's help, they pushed it open to find Mrs. Chen pinned beneath a fallen bookshelf, shaken but conscious. The building made strange noises all morning, the elderly woman whispered as they carefully lifted the shelf. Like someone was working on the walls. Outside, sirens wailed closer. Through the dusty window, Michael could see emergency vehicles arriving, firefighters deploying equipment with practiced efficiency. "We need to check the other apartments," Michael said as they helped Mrs. Chen to her feet. "Who else stayed behind?" "Mr. Jimenez on the second floor," Mrs. Chen replied, leaning heavily on Rebecca. "And the Torres family in 3B, their youngest has a fever." The realization that more people were trapped above, potentially in greater danger, sent a chill through Michael. The collapsed stairwell made reaching them nearly impossible. "Get Mrs. Chen outside," he instructed Rebecca. "Tell the firefighters about the others." "What about you?" Rebecca's eyes widened with concern. "There's a maintenance ladder in the back hall. I can reach the second floor that way." Rebecca hesitated, clearly torn between helping Mrs. Chen and accompanying Michael. "Please," Michael said softly. "Lily needs you safe." At the mention of her daughter, Rebecca nodded reluctantly, guiding Mrs. Chen toward the exit. The maintenance ladder was old, but sturdy enough. Michael climbed carefully, emerging into the second-floor hallway, where the dust was even thicker. A groan from apartment 2A led him to Mr. Jimenez, who had been knocked unconscious when part of his ceiling collapsed. As Michael helped the dazed man to his feet, a firefighter appeared at the window, helping them onto the ladder truck's platform. Below, a growing crowd watched the rescue efforts, news cameras capturing every moment. "The Torres family," Michael told the firefighter urgently. "Third floor, apartment B." "We're working on it," the firefighter assured him. "Another team is accessing from the roof." On the ground, paramedics swarmed around the rescued residents. Michael scanned the crowd anxiously until he spotted Rebecca being examined by an EMT, Lily clutching her hand. When Lily saw Michael, she broke away, running to him with tears streaming down her dust-smudged face. "You found Mrs. Chen," she cried, throwing her arms around his waist. "We did," Michael confirmed, checking her for injuries. "Are you okay?" Lily nodded solemnly. "I stayed with Sergeant Diaz like Mom said. He kept me safe." Over Lily's head, Michael met Rebecca's gaze. Despite the chaos, something passed between them, an understanding, a connection forged in crisis. As the afternoon progressed, all residents were eventually rescued. The Torres family emerged last, carried down by firefighters to cheering onlookers. Miraculously, no one was critically injured, though several required hospitalization for smoke inhalation and minor injuries. News crews documented everything, interviewing residents who spoke openly about the building's long-standing issues and Daniel's refusal to make repairs. By evening, the story had spread across local stations, complete with images of Morton and Daniels fleeing the scene just before the collapse. At the IC Community Center, which had transformed into an emergency shelter, Amara Washington moved purposefully among the displaced families, collecting statements and documenting their experiences. Susan coordinated with social services to ensure everyone's immediate needs were met. "This changes everything," Elena said, joining Michael and Rebecca at a quiet table in the corner. "The city can't ignore this. Building inspectors are already saying the collapse wasn't natural. Support beams were deliberately weakened." "Sabotage," Michael said quietly, the pieces fitting together. "Their accelerated timeline. When intimidation failed, they created the emergency they needed. But they didn't count on us being ready," Rebecca pointed out, "or on the cameras capturing their escape." Across the room, Lily moved among the children, distributing paper cranes she'd taught them to fold. Each child clutched one like a talisman of hope, a small, bright spot in the darkness of displacement. Captain Mercer arrived as evening fell, her official demeanor softened by genuine concern as she surveyed the shelter. When she approached Michael, he braced himself for reprimand. Instead, she said, "Simply, the department has officially requested a state investigation into Deputy Commissioner Morton and his associates. Your suspension is lifted, effective immediately." Relief washed over Michael, but before he could respond, Mercer continued, her voice dropping. "This isn't over, Reed. Men, like Morton, have powerful friends. They'll fight back, and they'll target anyone they see as responsible for their downfall." The warning hung in the air between them, a shadow over the day's small victories. As families settled in for the night on cots and donated blankets, Michael watched Rebecca tuck Lily into bed, smoothing her hair and whispering reassurances. They had won a battle today, but the war for justice and for the future of this community was far from over. And somewhere in the city, Morton and Daniels were surely planning their countermove. 3 days after the collapse, the community center remained a hub of activity. Volunteers coordinated meals, distributed donations, and helped families navigate insurance claims. State investigators moved methodically through the building's wreckage, documenting evidence of deliberate tampering. For Michael, reinstated to active duty, the days blurred together in a whirlwind of statements, evidence collection, and protective vigilance. He had taken to patrolling the center during his off hours, Captain Mercer's warning echoing in his mind. "You should rest," Rebecca told him, approaching with a cup of coffee as he completed. Another circuit of the building's perimeter. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, yet her determination remained undiminished. "I could say the same to you," Michael replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. Rebecca glanced back at the main room where Lily was helping younger children with an art project. "I'll rest when they're safe, all of them." The morning news played on a television in the corner, the volume low but the headlines clear. "Corruption Investigation Expands." Images showed state police entering Morton's office with search warrants, followed by footage of Frank Daniels being questioned outside his home. "It's working," Rebecca said quietly. "The truth is coming out." Michael nodded, but couldn't shake his unease. Morton won't go down without a fight. Men like him always have contingency plans. As if summoned by his words, Elena hurried toward them, her expression tight with concern. "Michael, you need to see this." She led them to her office where Amara Washington sat reviewing documents, her normally composed face troubled. "These were just filed with the city clerk," the attorney explained, sliding papers across the desk. "Emergency demolition orders for all 12 properties in the neighborhood, including the community center." "What?" Rebecca exclaimed. They can," Amara interrupted grimly. "The collapse gives them justification to declare the entire block structurally unsound. Once demolished, the land reverts to the city for development." "But the investigation," Michael began. "Will take months," Amara finished. "These orders take effect in 48 hours. Michael studied the documents, noting the authorization signatures, not Morton's, but those of 3 city council members known to be his allies. He's sacrificing himself to save the plan, Michael realized. Even if Morton goes down for corruption, the demolition proceeds. The development contracts, likely awarded to companies he secretly controls, will make millions. "And everyone here loses their homes permanently," Rebecca added, the injustice burning in her voice. Elena leaned forward. "There's a council meeting tomorrow morning to finalize the orders. Our last chance to stop this. We'll need more than emotional appeals," Amara cautioned. "We need legal grounds to block the demolition." Michael's phone buzzed with a text from Diaz. "Found something. Meet me at the old library archives, urgent." The city archives smelled of dust and forgotten paper. Diaz waited among towering shelves of bound documents, accompanied by a thin man with thick glasses and an excited demeanor. "This is Arthur Winters, Susan's husband," Diaz explained. "He's the city's historical archivist, Mr. Reed, Arthur greeted him enthusiastically. Your sergeant explained your situation. I believe I've found something that might help. Arthur led them to a table where he had spread out yellowed maps and documents. These are the original city planning documents from 1925. The neighborhood in question was designed as part of the City Beautiful movement, one of the first planned communities for working families. Michael studied the elegant drawings. It's interesting historically, but how does this help us now? Arthur's eyes gleamed. Because in 1976, the neighborhood was designated a historical district. He pointed to an official proclamation. The designation was never properly recorded in modern databases, but legally, it's still binding. Which means, Diaz prompted, which means they can't demolish those buildings without approval from the Historical Preservation Commission. Arthur finished triumphantly, and that requires public hearings, impact studies, architectural assessments. Time, Michael concluded. It gives us time. By evening, Amara had prepared legal filings based on Arthur's discovery. Elena had mobilized community members to attend the council meeting. Local media, tipped off to the historical angle, prepared coverage of what was quickly becoming a David versus Goliath story. At the community center, Michael found Rebecca explaining the developments to the assembled families, her natural leadership evident in how they listened intently to her words. Tomorrow won't be easy, she told them honestly. But for the first time, we're fighting on equal ground. As the meeting dispersed, Lily approached Michael with a determined expression. I want to go to the council meeting. Too. Michael knelt to her level. It might be boring, Lily, and there could be angry people there. Mrs. Chen says our stories matter, Lily replied with surprising gravity. I have a story too. Rebecca joined them, having overheard. She's right. This affects her as much as anyone. Michael nodded, reminded again of the courage that ran through this family he'd grown to care for so deeply. Later, as darkness fell, Michael accompanied Rebecca and Lily to their temporary housing, a small room at a nearby hotel provided by emergency services. Will you stay for dinner? Lily asked. Hopefully. We have sandwich stuff. The simple invitation touched something deep in Michael's heart. I'd like that. Over simple sandwiches and apple slices, they talked about ordinary things. Lily's school projects, Rebecca's work at the hospital, Michael's most interesting and child-appropriate police stories. For a brief moment, the crisis receded, replaced by something that felt remarkably like family. As Michael prepared to leave, his phone rang, an unknown number. Officer Reed, came Morton's smooth voice. I understand you've been quite busy today. Michael tensed, motioning for Rebecca to take Lily into the other room. What do you want, Morton? To offer some friendly advice, Morton replied calmly. You've become attached to the Carters. Admirable, but potentially painful. Accidents happen, Officer Reed, especially to people who interfere with progress. The threat hung in the air, all the more terrifying for its quiet delivery. If you threaten them, Michael began, fury rising in his chest. Threats? No, Morton interrupted smoothly. Merely an observation about life's uncertainties. Sleep well, Officer Reed. The line went dead, leaving Michael staring at the phone, ice forming in his veins. Through the door, he could see Rebecca reading Lily a bedtime story, their heads bent together over a book, unaware of the shadow that had just fallen across their future. Tomorrow's council meeting wasn't just about saving buildings anymore. It was about protecting the family he had unexpectedly found, and stopping a man who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. The city council chambers buzzed with tension as Michael arrived early the next morning. News cameras lined the back wall, reporters drawn by the unlikely story of a neighborhood, fighting City Hall, and winning. Residents filled the public seating area, many wearing hastily made buttons bearing the words, Historic District, Preserve Our Community. Michael scanned the room for Morton but saw only his allies on the council, huddled in whispered conversation. Daniels sat in the front row, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. Nervous? Diaz asked, joining Michael near the entrance. Not about the meeting, Michael admitted. Morton's threat last night. We've got it covered, Diaz assured him. Unmarked units are watching the hotel, and Captain Mercer authorized protective detail for the Carters. Relief washed through Michael, tempered by the knowledge that such protection couldn't last forever. The chamber doors opened again as Rebecca entered with Lily, followed by Elena, Amara, and a procession of residents. Mrs. Chen walked slowly with her cane, proudly wearing her historic district button. Mr. Jimenez carried a stack of old photographs showing the neighborhood in its early days. Rebecca caught Michael's eye across the room, offering a small, determined smile that somehow steadied him more than any words could have. The meeting began with formal procedure, the council chair announcing the agenda item: emergency demolition order for the Riverside District. The city engineer presented photographs of the collapsed building, emphasizing structural concerns for the entire block. When it was time for public comment, Amara Washington approached the podium with Arthur Winters, presenting the historical documentation with methodical precision. The 1976 designation legally protects these buildings from demolition without historical review, she concluded. We move that the emergency order be dismissed immediately. Councilman Warren, Morton's most vocal ally, leaned forward. This paperwork is over 40 years old. Surely public safety concerns override outdated designations. The law is not outdated, Councilman, Amara countered smoothly. Neither is the safety of residents. Which brings us to our next point. At her nod, Diaz approached the podium, presenting the evidence they'd gathered. The building collapse was not accidental. State investigators have confirmed deliberate tampering with support structures. He turned to face the audience. We have reason to believe this was done to force evacuation and fast-track demolition for development interests. A murmur swept through the chamber. Daniels shifted uncomfortably, his lawyer's expression growing increasingly concerned. Rebecca was called next. As she approached the podium, Lily followed unexpectedly, standing on tiptoes to reach the microphone. My name is Lily Carter, she began, her clear voice echoing in the suddenly quiet room. I'm 8 years old and our building was my home. She unfolded a paper crane, setting it on the podium. When we were hungry, our neighbors brought food. When I was scared, they told me stories. When the bad men made our building fall, everyone helped each other. Her simple testimony, delivered with a child's directness, carried more weight than any legal argument could have. As the meeting continued, residents shared stories of community resilience. Mr. Jimenez displayed his photographs of neighborhood children playing in the distinctive arched doorways that had once made the district architectural showpiece. Just as the council prepared to vote, the chamber doors opened. James Morton entered, flanked by 2 serious-looking men in suits, not his usual lawyers. Those are federal agents, Diaz whispered to Michael. Morton approached the podium, his customary composure visibly strained. In light of ongoing investigations, I am recusing myself from all matters related to the Riverside District. He paused, then added stiffly, the Department of Urban Development withdraws its support for the emergency demolition orders. The pronouncement sent shockwaves through the chamber. Daniel stood abruptly, attempting to leave, only to be intercepted by more federal agents entering from a side door. The council vote was unanimous. Demolition denied. Historical review required. Emergency funds allocated for repairs to salvageable buildings. Outside the chambers in the bright midday sun, celebration erupted among the residents. Elena was already discussing next steps: community ownership models, renovation grants, housing cooperatives. Michael found Rebecca and Lily at the edge of the crowd, watching the scene with quiet satisfaction. It's really over? Rebecca asked, her voice holding cautious hope. The federal investigation into Morton's dealings triggered a larger corruption probe, Michael explained. They've been building a case for months. Our evidence was the final piece they needed. And Daniels? Multiple charges from fraud to criminal endangerment. He won't be developing property for a very long time. Lily looked up at them both. Does this mean we can go home? Rebecca knelt to her daughter's level. Not to our old apartment, but home isn't just a building, remember? Lily nodded solemnly. It's the people who help you. Exactly, Rebecca smiled, her eyes meeting Michael's over Lily's head. Something unspoken passed between them. A recognition of the journey they'd shared, the bonds formed through crisis and care. As weeks passed, the neighborhood began its slow revival. Some buildings proved unsalvageable, but others were carefully restored under the guidance of the Historical Commission. The community center expanded its programs, becoming a hub for education and advocacy. Elena's vision of community housing became reality. Through grants and municipal partnerships. One crisp autumn morning, Michael stood before the renovated building where a new family was receiving keys to their apartment. The distinctive arched doorway had been restored to its original beauty, a physical symbol of resilience and renewal. Rebecca joined him, watching as Lily demonstrated paper crane folding to neighborhood children on the front steps. Captain Mercer offered me a permanent position with community outreach, Michael said. Working with neighborhoods like this one, building better relationships between police and residents. You'll be perfect for it, Rebecca replied warmly. Michael hesitated, then asked the question that had lingered unspoken between them. The hospital offered you that full-time position. Will you take it? Rebecca nodded. We're staying. This community is part of us now. She glanced at him, sideways. Besides, Lily would never forgive me if we moved away from her favorite police officer. Just Lily? Michael asked quietly. Rebecca's smile deepened as she took his hand. Not just Lily. Across the street, Mrs. Chen emerged from her new apartment, leaning on her cane as she called out. To them. Are you coming to the housewarming? Everyone's waiting. Hand in hand, they crossed the street toward the gathering community, no longer defined by struggle and survival, but by connection and possibility. Lily ran to meet them, a paper crane clutched carefully in her hands. I made this. One special, she announced, presenting it to them both. It's our family. Indeed, the intricately folded paper somehow contained 3 figures, connected by delicate folds yet standing strong together. Much like the family they had become, formed not by conventional paths but through compassion, courage, and the simple, profound understanding that sometimes the most important journeys begin with noticing a child with a moving belly and choosing not to look away.